welcome back to my channel Code with Hafiz. My name is Hafizullah Masoudi and this is our 6th video of this tutorial, which is making the multiple authentication system in Laravel framework. And before we start guys, I want to say if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to not miss the updates or any further uploads. So let's start. Let's first log into our system. As you can see, I already have opened our multi-auth project in the browser. So let's log in as administrator and password is password. If you guys remember, in our last video, we finished everything about managing the users, and we said that the delete functionality will be left to the end of this tutorial. We will work on all the delete functionalities at the end of the tutorial. So if I show you, you can see our show blade is working fine. Our edit is also working just fine. And this is for the creating user. So in this video, we will start working by managing our permissions. So the first thing that we need is an index page for our permissions to show all the permissions, same as we are showing the users in this page. So let's first create a link for the permissions in here. So let's open our code in text editor. So to open our project, let's open first a command prompt. And let me zoom it a little bit. Yeah. Now in here, let's say cd /wam64/www/multi-auth project. Now we want to open this project in the code editor. So code dot. Just enter and it will open the project in Visual Studio Code. Now let's go to this resources, views, admin, layouts, and this admin blade. And if I come or scroll down, you can see this is for managing the users. And let's also change this icon for the users. So in here, let's say users and change this one also to users. And if you check the browser, yeah, it looks fine. So the next thing, let's say manage permissions. And for the icon, what I want is, so for the permissions, the icon that I want, let's put bars. And if we go back and refresh, I think that's good. Now let's declare the route for this href. So our double curly brackets, and inside this, let's say route, and we want to name it permission index. Now let's create this route inside our web.php, which is inside this routes folder, web.php. And at the bottom, let's say route : get, and the URL should be manage, not user, permission /index, comma, it should go to admin controller, and we want it to go to at permission index method. We also want to give it a name, and the name is the same as we give it to our route. So permission index. Now let's create this permission index method inside our controller, which is in app http controllers admin controller. So in here, if I scroll down, yeah, in here let's say public function and permission index, our curly brackets. Now the first thing that I want to do is grab all the permissions from the database and store it in a variable called permissions, which should be equal to our permission model : all. And after that, let's also create a variable by the name of count. or if I scroll up, or we don't need the count, we will look for the index of each element of the array. So yeah, let's return finally our view. So return view admin dot manage dot permission dot index, and we want to compact the variable permissions. Now let's create this index blade and also this permission folder. So inside this admin manage, as you can see, we already have created the permission folder in our previous videos. So let's right click on it and new file and index.blade.php. Now inside here, what I want to do is copy everything from the user index. So Ctrl A, Ctrl C and paste it in index of permission. And in here guys, let's edit from the top. So in here, let's say manage permissions, and for the create link, instead of create new user, let's say create new permission, and this should be not user plus, only plus. We will work on this user permission create route later. Let's fetch all the permissions in our table. So the first thing for the permission we need is the name. The next thing should be Slack, and the third one is description. And instead of users, I want to say permissions. Let's copy this one and paste it here and remove the S. And this is the loop. That's fine. Now in here, let's copy this and paste it. The name is okay. Paste it in here also, and or instead of name in here, we want to say display name. If you check the database, the field that we want to display in here is called display name. And the next one, which is Slack, it is named in the database as name. And the next one should be description. Now let's remove these routes from here because we don't need it. Now let's check our browser how it looks. If I refresh and click on this manage permissions, you can see it says class permission not found. And if we go back to our code editor and come to this admin controller, you can see we are using this permission model, but if I scroll to the top, we are not using it in our controller. So in here, what I want to do is duplicate this one, and instead of role, let's say permission. And now if I go back and refresh, now the error has been changed and it says undefined variable user. And if I go back to the code editor and index blade, let's see where we have left the user variable. Yeah, in here. So let's copy this and paste it here. Now refresh, you can see it works just fine now, and it is fetching all the permissions that we have already in our database. So the next thing we want to do is, guys, let's work on this create new permission link. So let's give it a route, and we want to name this route permission create. Now let's create this route inside our route file web.php. Duplicate it and paste in here also, and instead of index I want to say create, and the message should be get. Now let's create this permission create method inside admin controller. So scroll down, and at the bottom let's say public function permission create method. Now inside this method what I want to do is just load the create view for our permissions. So how can we do that? We can do that by saying return view, or let's just copy this one from here. So copy this and paste it in here, and let's remove this compact because we don't need it. And instead of index, I want to say create. Now let's create this create blade for the permission. So in here, let's say new file create.blade.php. Let's copy everything from index.blade of the permission into this create blade. So in here, let's remove first this table because we don't need it. And after that, let's also remove this link. And instead of manage permissions, let's say create permission. Now let's work on this card body, or let's also add new in here too. So inside this card body, let's first declare our form tag, and in here we want our CSRF field first. CSRF underscore field. We can do that just by saying lv CSRF field. This is a Laravel extension that I have installed in the Visual Studio Code, which gives me the ability to write the code like this. So after our CSRF field, what I want to do is create a row. Create a div with the class of row, and inside this, let's say call md6. And the thing we want to do in here is, guys, we want to be able to create two kinds of permissions. One basic and one the other one should be CRUD permission. So first of all, we need to put a checkbox in here. So let's create the checkbox. Let's create a div with the class of form dash check dash label. And inside this div, what I want to do is put a label. And let's remove this for and give the class of form dash check dash label. And guys, I'm sorry, this one should be inline. Form dash check dash inline, and this one should be dash label. So inside this label, I want to declare my input, and the type should be radio. And let's give it a class also by the name of form dash check dash input. And after this one, let's say we want a name also, and it should be permission underscore type. And we also want to bind this input with a view object. So for that, we can say v dash model equals to permission underscore type. And we also want to give the value of basic because it will be basic permission. And for the text, I want to say basic permission. Now let's copy this checkbox or radio button and paste it again. Now for this one, what I want to do is all is the same, but instead of basic, for the value I want to say CRUD. And in here for the text, we want to say CRUD permission. And if we go to the browser and refresh and now click on this create new, you can see these are our radio buttons. So the next thing I want to do is when we click on this basic permission, so we should have three inputs, one for name, one for slug, and one for description. But for the CRUD, I want 4 checkboxes. For example, one for create, the other one for read, the other one for update, and the final one for delete. We can do that by using vue.js, and I will show you guys in a minute that how can we do that. So after this row, let's create another row, and inside this row what I want to do is create 3 input fields. So the first one, let's say call md6, 6. And inside this div I want to say a form group, and it should have a label for name, for not name, display name. So in here let's say name, display name, and we want an input also. Type should be text, class should be form control, and name should be display underscore name. And that's all, guys. Now let's copy this form group, or let's copy this whole call md6, paste it, or instead of 6 let's say this should be 4, and this one should be also 4, and the next one should be also 4. So let's copy this input field and paste it again. So the second one is for slug, which is name in the database, but for the text I want to say slug, and the name should be name, and the third one should be for description, so let's say description, and display name should be description. Paste it in name field also. Now the thing I want to do is bind this whole row with the value of this first one input, radio button input, and whenever this radio button is selected, so I want to show this row. So let's create our script tag in here. So for that, what I can do is create the section of scripts, and in here let's create the script tag, and in here let's say var app equals to new view, and inside this let's first target our element, which is the app ID. Now after that comma, and let's now create our data field. Now inside this data field, what I want to do is, let's say our permission underscore type should be by default selected basic, and for this row what I want to do is put a condition, and the condition that I want to put here, so for that we can say v-if. By using vue.js we can put conditions right in the tag, so our quotations, and we want to say if permissions or permission underscore type equals to basic, then we want to show this row. So if I go back to the browser and refresh, you can see now it only shows this one, and if I click on this it goes away. So that's looking good. Now the next thing I want to do is work on this CRUD permission radio button, because when we click on this we want to show something else. So let's work on this, that's something else. So if I return to my code editor, and in here after this row let's put another row. So the first thing that we need is just one input, and if I explain, guys, why we need one input instead of more inputs, because for example you want to create the CRUD permissions for tasks, so the only thing that you need to submit is tasks. Then you can create those 4 permissions, which is create, read, update and delete dynamically for that one input, which is task. So that is the reason we need one input. So for that let's say dot call dash md dash 6, and in here let's create a form group, and inside this form group we need a label, and this should be for what should we name that input. let's name it resource. So in here also resource, and in here let's say input. Type should be text, and we should give the class of form control. And let's also give it the name of resource, and let's also bind it with a view object. So for that we can say v-model equals to resource. And I think guys that's all we need. So let's also give it a condition with vue.js, because we only want to show this row when our CRUD permissions are selected. So for that we can say v-if equals to, so if permission underscore type equals to CRUD, then we want to show this input. So if I go back to the browser and refresh, it gives an error. Or let's in here let's say multi-auth and password. For some reason I was logged out. I don't know why. I think my WAMP server just restarted itself, so that could be the reason that my session was over. So yeah, let's go to manage permissions. So create new permission and click on this CRUD. You can see now it only shows this resource with one field. Now the next thing I want to do is let's create 4 checkboxes for each: create, read, update and delete. So guys, let's create those checkboxes. So if I return to my code, now after this row I want another row, so dot row, and in here what I want to do, let's first copy this if statement, because we want to show this row only if the CRUD permission type is true. So paste it in here. Now after this let's create a colmd, so dot col dash md dash 6, and let's create a form check dash form check, and inside our form check we want a label with a class of form dash check dash label, and press tab. Well, we don't need this 4, so I will remove it. And inside this label we want an input. Type should be text. Oh sorry guys, type should be checkbox. Now the class should be form dash check dash input. These are all Bootstrap classes for which you can search in the Bootstrap or getbootstrap.com. So after the class what we want is give it a name. Now what should we name it? We should name it CRUD selected. CRUD selected, and we also want to bind this input with the view object. So for that we can say v-model equals to CRUD selected, and we also want to give the value, and the value should be, for example, for create, and the text should be create. Now let's copy this form check. So let's copy this form check and paste it 3 times more. So the second one we want is for read, so I will just change the value to read and the text also to read. And the third one should be update, and the text should be also update. and the fourth one should be delete, and the text should be also delete. Now if we check our browser, let's refresh and click on this, you can see it now shows this create, read, update and delete. Now what we want to do is select all of them by default. So how can we do that? We can do that by vue.js. So let's get back to our code, and at the bottom let's create another object by the name of crud selected. As you can see guys, we binded each one of them with this object. So in here we will create it, and the type should be as an array, and inside this array the value should be create, comma, read, comma, update, comma, delete. And now if we go back to our browser and refresh, you can see all of them are selected by default. Now inside this, for example, let's type tasks. So we also want to show a demo in here, which should be a table, and show the demo of each one of them in that table. For example, we want to create the resource for this create show, so it will show us the demo in here: create tasks, or read tasks, update tasks, delete tasks. I hope you get the idea guys. So let's create that. Now what we need is get back to our code, and let's grab all of this in another row. So I will cut this from here, or don't cut it, just in here create a row, and inside this row I want to call -md-6, and I want to indent this div also. So in here let's paste one, paste another, and I think that's good. Yeah, that's good. Now after this main call md6, let's create another call -md-6. Now for this one, what I want to do is let's create a table, and let's also give the class of table, and give it a thead, and inside thead our tr, th, let's duplicate it for 4 times or 3 times. Now after our thead we want the tbody, and our tr and td 3 times. So the first one that we need is for name. The next one that a permission has is a slug, and the third one should be description. So let's check it how it looks like. If I refresh, and yeah, because we don't have the vf in there, so let's cut this one from here and remove it from here too, and paste it in this main row. So if I go back and refresh, yeah, you can see guys, now it looks, but if you see, this is broken now. So what can we do is change the call md6 of this divs to 12. So let's do that. First of all, let's change this one, or that is the main, don't change that, change this one to 12, and after that this one to 12 too, and I think that's all. So if I get back and refresh and click on this, you can see it's now gone to this way. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to show this table whenever we type something here. So how can we do that? We can do that, for example, giving this table an if statement for this call md6. So let's give it a statement of v-if equals to, we want to show it according to the resource. So we can say in here resource, and we want to check it with the length of resource. So if the length of resource is greater or equals to 3, then we want to show this table. And we also want to give it another statement also, because we also want to check this table according to this CRUD selected, because if none of the CRUD option or checkbox is selected, so then we also don't want to show this table. So what we can do in here is put and we can say CRUD selected dot length greater than 0. So that's all we need in here. So let's check it. If I refresh and click on this, oh, it's broken. I think I know why, guys, because we are using in here the resource object, but we didn't have created our resource object. So what we can do in here is just say resource, and we want this to be as empty string. So let's check our browser again. Now if I refresh and click on this, yeah, you can see. Now if I type task, you can see it is 2 alphabets, but when I press the third one, you can see our table is shown there. So that's the idea that I wanted to share with you guys. Now the next thing I want to do is show the demo of each one of them in this table. For example, in the name field, I want to show the demo of each one of them with their names. In the slug, their slugs, and in description, their descriptions. So how can we do that? We can do that by assigning text to these TDs with vue.js. So let's assign the text for them. But before that, I want to say, guys, that because we are passing the data as an array, so we have to look for them in this tr with vue.js. So we can do that by saying v-for equals to, for example, we want to say item, comma, index in CRUD selected, because this is the array that we want to store in this item variable or object. So that's all for our loop, and we also want to declare our key, which should be the index of each item in the array. Now for the TD, we can say v-text, because we want to store the text inside this one. Now in here, I want to create a method, and so the first one should be for name. So I can say CRUD name, and I want to pass the item variable to this method. Now let's copy this one, and the second one should be, for example, CRUD slug, and I also want to pass the item in this CRUD slug also, and in description, this one should be for description. So CRUD this description, and we will leave the item as it is. So guys, these were declaring the methods for these text values or for these TD values. Now we have to create these methods in our Vue instance. So how can we do that? We can do that by declaring our methods field. So in here I will say comma methods and our curly brackets. Now we have access to our methods and we can create them. Now the first one that I want to create, if I scroll up, yeah, CRUD name. So let's copy this one and in here paste it. Column, let's say function, and we have item coming. So our curly brackets. Now inside this function, what we want to say is return item dot substr, because we want to subtract it, and we want from 0 to 1, and we now want to say dot to uppercase, because we want to change them to uppercase, the first letter of them. So after that we want to concatenate it with a space, and after the space let's concatenate it again. Now we want to declare our app dot resource, because this is not an anonymous function, so we should use this app variable instead of this keyword, and if I want to use this keyword in vue.js, so I must remove this function from here, and now I have to access to this keyword, and instead of app I can say this dot resource. So it will work also, because now it is an anonymous function, which is a modern JavaScript technique. So in here, after resource, what I want to do is say dot sub str, and I want from 0 to 1 the first letter, and we want to say dot to uppercase, and after that I want to concatenate it again with app dot, or not app this time, this dot resource and dot sub str1. So that's all for this function. So after this, let's say comma, we have another function, and that should be this CRUD slug. So let's copy it and paste it here, and item is also coming. So for the slug, what we want to return is say return item dot to lowercase, because we want to change all the cases to lowercase, or all the alphabet to lowercase. So we want to concatenate it with a dash, and after the dash I want to say this dot resource dot also to lowercase. Well, that's all for the slug. Now the third method that I want to create is CRUD description. So comma CRUD description, and we are also passing the item, so item, and in here what we want to return is say return allow a user to concatenated with item dot to uppercase, and we also want to concatenate it with a space, and concatenate it with this dot resource dot sub str from 0 to 1, and dot uppercase, and after that we also want to concatenate it with this dot resource dot sub str1. So I think that's all we need for our methods. And one thing more that has left, guys, the button for our to submit this form. So let's create it. I want to say button, it should say create permission, and for the style, let's give it a class of btn primary. So now let's get back to our browser and refresh. This is the button, and now if I click on this, and in here if I type tasks, you can see it shows C tasks. Oh, wait a minute, guys, it is throwing an error. The description field is working just fine. We have error in this C tasks, in this name field method, and the slug method. So let's get back to our code and check what is the problem. In here, guys, we are getting the first alphabet, but we are not returning the other ones. So in here, let's concatenate it again, and at the middle of these concatenations we want to say item dot sub str and 1. So I think that's good, and if I check back, yeah, this is looking good. Now let's fix the slug. So as you can see, guys, for this one we didn't declare our parentheses, so I think that could be the problem. So let's refresh it again and click on this tasks. Yeah, you can see, guys, it looks the kind that we want. So guys, this was all about the blade part for the HTML and CSS part. So now we want to work on the backend because we want to submit this form according to these two values, and we want to save the data to the database. So to do that, we have to give a route to the form. So let's get back to code, and if we scroll to the up, to the very up in here, let's give it a method of post. And for the action, I want to declare a route. So double curly brackets and say route, our single quotes, and we should name this route permission create. So now let's create this route in our route file. So web.php. Duplicate it, paste this one, and paste it in here also. And instead of create, or guys, we have created the create route. This one should be store because we are trying to store. So it should be store. Let's copy this, paste it here, and get back to our create and paste it in here also. So guys, the next thing we want to do is create this method inside the admin controller. So let's say public function permission store, and we have request coming from the form, and we also have, or no, we don't have any IDs. So inside this method, let's first validate the data. So for that, we can say, now the first thing I want to do is check for the two values of review button, because we want to check if the form is submitted by the permission type of basic or CRUD permission. So let's say if request arrow permission type, permission underscore type equals to basic, then we want to run this code, and instead if, so another else if, and we want to say request arrow permission underscore type equals to CRUD. So we want to run the other code, and at last we want to declare our else, and inside our else statement, let's say return redirect, and we want to return the redirect of a route, which is permission create, and we also want to pass the input values, so we can say with input. So let's work first on this basic functionality. So the first thing that I want to do is validate the data. So for that, I can say $ this arrow validate, and we want to validate the request, and then declare our array, and inside this array, the first value is display underscore name, and it should be equal to required pipe max length should be 255, comma, and the next one I want is name, so it equals to be required because it is the slug, so I also want to give the max value of 255, and I also want to say alpha dash because to check for the dash, and after that I want this slug to be unique, so let's say unique, and we want to check its uniqueness in the table of permissions, so permissions, and I want to check the name field in this permissions table. So after the name is description, so description should be equal to, let's not give it required, let's say sometimes, and pipe max should be 255, and after the validation, let's create our model object, so we can say $permission equals to permission or new permission model, And after this, let's assign our data to the fields of the database. So permission arrow display name should equal to request arrow display name, and duplicate this one 2 times more. The next one should be name, and the third one should be description. Let's copy this to this also. Now after this, I want to save everything to the database, so we can say permission arrow save. And after saving everything, we want to return the redirect. So return redirect route, and the route should be permission index. So that's all for our permission as a basic. Now let's start working on this permission type as CRUD. So let's copy this validation from here, and we want to put it in here. Now let's remove these other 2 validations because we only want to validate one input field, and its name is resource, and I want it to be required, and instead of max I want to say minimum should be 3, and pipe max should be, for example, 100, let's say, and I also want to say alpha. So that's all for the validation. Now after that, let's get the value of these 4 checkboxes, but we have to send it as an array. So what I can do in here is declare a hidden input field. So let's create it under this div. In here, what I want to do is say input type should be hidden, and the name should be, for example, let's name it CRUD underscore selected. And we also want to give it a value, but we want to bind its value to these 4 checkboxes. So how can we do that? We can do that by saying colon value equals to, now as you can see, we are binding this checkboxes to this one object. So we can put this one object in this value field. Now it will store each one of them value in this one input if these checkboxes are selected. So let's get back to our admin controller, and we want to now explode this CRUD selected field, which is coming as a request. So in here, let's create a variable called CRUD, and it should be equal to explode, and I want to explode everything according to comma, and the explode value is coming from request arrow CRUD selected. Yeah, that's all. So now after this, let's check for the length of or the count of this CRUD variable. So we can do that by saying if count this CRUD. If the count is greater than 0, then we want to declare a for each. So let's say for each CRUD as, for example, x. So then I want to make the slug display name and description and put it to the database or save it to the database. So inside this for each, what I want to do is let's first create our display name. So display underscore name equals to UC words. UC words because we want to change the first letter of every word to capital letter. So UC words, and we want to say $x concatenated with a space, and after that let's say request our resource. And if I go to the, we have to concatenate it also in here. So if I go to my create blade and scroll to the up, you can see this is the field that we want to concatenate in here. So after the display name, let's create our slug, and it should be equal also to str to lower x, and we want to concatenate a dash, and after the dash I want to concatenate our request arrow resource. Now after our slug, let's create the description. So $description should equal to our double quotation and allow a user to concatenate it with str to upper, and we want to change the x value. So and concatenate it again with UC words and request arrow resource. Now after this, let's create our permission model object. So $permission equals to new permission. Let's copy everything from here. So copy all from here and paste it here. Let's indent it a little bit. Now instead of this request, we only want to pass these variables. So let's remove this request from here. And finally we are saving everything to the database. And after our if statement, then we want to return redirect to a route, and the route should be permission index. Now I think that's all for our creating permission. So let's check our code in the browser. So if I refresh, as you can see we have a error and it says route permission store not defined. Yeah, I think if we go to the blade and see this permission store and come back here, as you can see we are creating the route, but why isn't this working? If I go back and refresh, yeah, I think I didn't save the file, so it's working fine. So let's say we want to create a permission for create post, and let's say create dash post for the slug, and we want to say users will be able to create posts, and say create permission. It says post method is not supported for this route, and if we get back to the route, you can see we are sending this route as get. It should be post. So let's get back and refresh, press enter. Method validate alpha dash does not exist. It is alpha dash, not alpha dash. So let's get back to our admin controller, and in here let's put an A. So if I refresh again, now it says another problem. If I scroll down, or let's get back to our form and refresh and manage permissions, and let's create new permission, this one, and this one, create permission. It throws the error. So let's get back to our code and see what is the problem. So we are validating everything, that looks fine. And yeah, this should be not namespace, this should be name. and this one should be also named. So let's get back and refresh. You can see now we have created this permission at the bottom. Let's create grab permissions. So click on this. We want to create 4 tasks and we want to create all of them. So create permission, and here we also have a namespace problem. Yeah, this one should be name, and this one should be slug. So now refresh again, and yeah, we have the 4 and we have all of them created successfully. So guys, this was how to create permissions. Now let's work on this index file a little more, because we want to limit the permissions to be shown 10 at each page, and we want to give it a pagination, and we also want to sort the array descending type according to their IDs. So let's get back to our code and scroll up, and in here, instead of all, let's first say order by, and we want to order by according to ID, comma, desk or descending, and we also want to give it a pagination, so paginate, and we want to limit it to 10. Now after this, let's get back to our index page, and at the bottom after our table, let's create a div and give it a class of row and another class of justify dash content dash center, which is a bootstrap class, and inside this our curly brackets, 4 exclamation marks, and now we want to create the pagination for this permissions array. So copy this one and let's say $, paste it, and we want to give the pagination links, and the style should be, for example, pagination : bootstrap -4. I think that's all for our pagination. So if I get back to the browser and refresh, you can see now it has been limited to 10 rows in each page, and if I go to the next page, yeah, it's working just fine. And now as you can see, it is sorted as descending. Our new permissions will be at the top of other permissions. So guys, after this, let's also give copy this pagination to our users also. So if I get back to the code and our admin controller, let's copy this line of code from here to the order by and paste it in the user index. As you can see, we are paginating it, but if I go to the user index, you can see we are not paginating anything. So let's copy the pagination from our index blade of permission to the index blade of users, and instead of users, I want to give pagination to the users. Instead of permissions, I want to give the pagination to this users variable. So I think that's all guys we need for the user. Now the next thing we want to do is work on our show blade, which is this eye or info icon. So let's get back to our code, and now I want to go to this layouts, or not layouts, we are working on this index. So in here, for this info route or link, I want to declare a route. So double curly brackets and route, and we want to give it the name of permission show. We also want to pass the ID, so comma $, permission arrow ID. Now let's create this route. So web.php, duplicate this one and paste it instead of permission store. So instead of store, I want to say show /ID. Now let's create this permission show method inside our admin controller. Let's say public function and permission show. We have ID coming, And let's first grab the ID from the database. So permission variable equals to our permission model, colon find or fill the ID. And after that we have to return our view. So return view and admin dot manage dot permission dot show, and we want to compact the permission variable. So let's create the show blade. So right click, new file, show.blade.php. Now inside here, what I want to do is copy everything from the index page and paste it there. Let's remove this table because we don't need it, and remove the pagination also. And at the top, let's remove this link from here, and instead of managing permissions, let's say, well, let's leave the link because we also want to put here the edit link. So instead of manage permissions, I want to say permission details, and leave the route like this because we don't want any errors. And in here I want to say edit permission. Now inside our code, what I want to show the permission details. So let's create a row, and inside this row let's create a call md-4, and in here I want to label, or before the label let's create a pre-tag and put a label in it. So remove the for, and inside this label I want to say, for example, name, and inside parenthesis I want to say display name. So please, let's put a space here. Now I want our double curly brackets and my permission variable arrow display underscore name. Now let's see how it looks like. So if I refresh and click on this, it says get method not supported, and that is because this should be get instead of post. So let's refresh. Yeah, you can see it shows the name of the permission, which is delete tasks. Now the next one, let's get back to our show blade and copy this code md4 2 times more. Now this one should be for Slack, and the final one should be, for example, for description, and this one should be also description. So let's refresh. Well guys, I think we must remove the row class from it because it's not looking good. Or what I can do is put a table in here. I think the table would be good. So, oh, that's okay, that's fine, leave it as it is. And the one thing that we can do is give this row class of text dash center. And now if I refresh, yeah, I think that's good, that's looking good. So guys, this was how to create the show blade for our permission. Now the next thing I want to do, if I go back, now we want to work on this edit permission functionality. So for that we have to first give this link a route. So let's go to our text editor and index blade, and let's copy this route from here and paste it for this edit link. And we are passing the ID, but instead of show we want to say edit. Now let's create this route in our route file. So duplicate this one and paste it instead of show, and in here also we want to say edit, and the method should be get. So now let's create this permission edit method in our admin controller. So what I want to do is let's copy this method, this show method. So paste it, and and instead of show I want to say edit, and in here we also want to load or return our edit blade. So guys, let's create this edit blade and right click, new file, edit.blade.php. Now let's copy everything from our create blade and paste it inside our edit blade. Well, for the edit we don't need all of these code, so remove the vue.js code from this page, and we also don't need this table, so remove this table also. We also don't need this row, remove this row also, remove this row also. Now we need 3 input fields, so leave these 3 and remove this row also. And now if we check our browser, so let's get back to the browser and refresh and click on this edit link, you can see this is what we want. So let's echo all the values in these inputs. So for that, in here for this input we can give it a value and double curly brackets, our permission variable arrow display name, display underscore name. Let's copy this value, give it to this one also, and instead of display name, and for this third one also paste it, and instead of display name let's say description. And we also want to change the text of this button to save changes. And if I go back and refresh, you can see now it shows the values. So now let's work on our functionality. One thing more guys, let's also change this create new permission to edit permission, and let's give it a route of permission update. And we also want to pass the ID, so permission arrow ID. Now let's copy this route name and create this route in our web.php. So duplicate this one, paste it instead of edit, and instead of edit I want to say update. Now after this let's create this method and admin controller. So in here what I want to do is say public function permission update, and we have request coming from the form, and we also have ID coming from the form. So guys, the only thing that we need to update is the display name and description, because of the future errors, or it will throw errors later when we delete a user or something else. So we don't want to mess with the slug. So let's get back to our edit blade and make this slug input disable. So in here let's say disabled. And now we can copy everything from this permission store, basic permission. So copy this one and paste it here. Now for the validation, let's remove the name or the slug. And after the validation, let's also remove the slug from here. And let's change this creating new permission model object. Let's say permission : find or fail the ID. And finally we are saving everything to the database and returning our redirection. Well, let's return our redirection to permission show, and we also want to pass the ID. I think that's all the code that we need for our permission update. So let's get back to our browser and refresh, and let's say we are updating this delete. Let's say also update it and click on the save changes. It says post method is not supported, and that is because in web.php we have to make this post instead of get. Well guys, it is good to make mistakes, because if you don't make mistakes you won't learn. So I think this should be not a problem. This is fun, right? So let's get back to our browser and refresh again and continue. You can see now it is updated successfully and returned our redirection to that specific permissions show blade. So guys, I think our managing permissions is also finished, and the only thing that is left is this delete functionality. So we will work on this delete functionality and the users delete functionality also at the end of this tutorial, after finishing the roles management also. So I think guys, this is enough for this video, and see you guys in the next video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel also.